not going to get any better than that. So, let's go now. So, start the clock. Firstly, the topic I'll be discussing, it's unfortunately one that tends to be kind of shrugged off and seen kind of as just a social norm and something that just happens. And it's something that I'm sure most, if not all of you, have contributed to at some point in your lives without even giving it a second thought. I'm here to tell you that animals don't belong in zoos. First, I'd like to address probably the strongest argument for animals being kept in zoos, which is conservation. And most of the time, preservation or more productively repopulation and then it being reintroduced into the wild. In one of the articles I read that was on naturalgeographic.com, written by this guy named James Owen, I found that especially large captive-born animals like tigers or wolves that were reintroduced into the wild, they had a very low success or survival rate after being reintroduced. It was 33%. And the team of researchers from the University of Exeter in the UK that Mr. Owen had interviewed had said that animals in captivity don't usually have the natural behaviors needed to survive in the wild, and the lack of fear of humans or hunting skills are major disadvantages. More than half of the fatalities that occurred were caused by human causes, such as vehicle collisions or deliberate shootings of the animals. Terribly redundant. And other ones, the carnivores, were more likely to starve to death. So, is it conservation or exploitation, really? Of the animals that are not being reintroduced to the wild, they're being kept, if they are being kept for their benefit, then why are people allowed to pay money for a casual visit to them? Zoos, they're not aimed towards the student or the scientist meant to peacefully observe. Instead, they're loaded with cotton candy booths and colorful mascots, romanticized and blown up like amusement parks. And it's this that attracts the erratic and irresponsible people that lead me to my second point. What's happening is the wall that's being made, or the wall of observation, I should say, that's being made to bridge the animals from humans are being broken. I'll tell you a story. In May 28, 2016, in the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, there was in one enclosure, there was a 440-pound Western lowland gorilla. You guys probably know him as Harambe, right? So Harambe, on that day, had an unexpected visitor, right? A 3-year-old boy who had climbed over a fence and dropped 15 feet into the enclosure into a shallow moat. Harambe then went to investigate the child. After 10 minutes of Harambe listening to the screaming and what would potentially be seen as confusing torment to this gorilla, he had begun to become agitated. So he grabbed the child and dragged him across the enclosure. Zookeepers had to make a decision to shoot and kill Harambe. Now, Harambe, in this instance, is a victim of an uncontrollable situation. He didn't cause it. And for that, he was murdered. And unfortunately, Harambe's not the only one. There's multiple cases over the years, and it doesn't seem like it's just going to stop. One case that I liked was I didn't like, but you know what I mean, was in the Santiago Zoo over a couple of lions. There was a grown man who had decided that he no longer wanted to live. And his choice of suicide was to be killed by lions. So he wrote a suicide note, walked casually to the Santiago Zoo, and he bought a ticket like any other casual onlooker, right? Walked into the lion enclosure, completely disrobed, climbed the fence, and antagonized lions. To this, they attacked him. Zookeepers, not knowing what's going on, of course, but this man being attacked, had to make a decision to shoot both the lions. This man survived, but the lions didn't. This is an instance that could have been potentially avoided if they just hadn't been there in the first place. Leads to my next point, is animals, they experience mental trauma similar to humans. And I read of one case in an article, it was pretty forwardly named Zoos Drive Animals Crazy, and it was written by Laura Smith, Sleep.com. It was about a polar bear named Gus, who resided in the Central Park Zoo in the 90s, and he would neurotically swim in figure eights for sometimes 12 hours a day. And this behavior earned Gus $25,000 worth of behavioral therapy. This pacing is a clear case of what's called zoochosis. And it's behavior that's repetitive, invariant, and without any obvious goal or function. And it affects many animals that are held in captivity. For a second, let's compare this to humans. If you guys were responsible for the well-being of someone who couldn't respond to you adequately, or they only really understood more than their need to survive, would it be okay for you guys to keep them from doing what they wanted to do, keep them from going where they want to go, and to add salt into the wound, charge people to watch them as they live? Honestly, I think it's time for all of us to say animals don't belong in zoos. I just heard a commercial.
Everybody should be dabbing it.
Mentions Harami and dabs at the same time. That's 2016 in that show.
I haven't seen it. There's some instances in which the animals are aggressive. I wish I was because I would have included it, but the animals truly. There's one instance in which they dropped in 1984 almost an instance of ramen, and instead the animals stood around and protected the rest of them and waited
All right, Devon, let's start with the things that I think are pretty solid, and then we'll talk about some things that are a little bit problematic. You have a very clear statement of your proposition. I think you have some good, vivid examples that will draw people's attention and help them remember what you're talking about. You do an excellent job speaking to the audience and kind of coming across in a sincere way. You look at people, your voice is effective at conveying your relationship to the topic, so I think your delivery is really solid there. And you used your time appropriately, so you're doing a good job on those kinds of things. A couple of places where there are some problems. There's no preview of what the structure is in the speech. I did hear you refer to some supporting points occasionally, but those supporting points don't sound like they're phrased as declarative statements. They're sometimes just transition phrases or another explanation, not really a claim so much as it is, more background material that's going on. You had one good quote, and I think you needed a few more so that you could make this a bit more general, because what you're doing is you're kind of relying on those examples. And you've got the dramatic examples, but the first thing that I would think that the respondent would look at is, okay, so Devon mentioned 3 or 4 particular examples when people visited zoos and there were problems. Here are the number of people who visit zoos every year. That sort of thing. And the frequency with which there is a problem is going to be relatively low in comparison. So that's why I think you needed a little bit more of that information. The zoochosis thing, I think, is probably a better argument to be making, that there is a problem for the animals that's going on there, and that that they suffer some way. They have mental derangement, or they're definitely not functional, that kind of thing. And I think that that's a good argument, but it needs a little bit more evidence on it, definitely. The first point that you start off with, though, is basically a rebuttal argument against the opponents of your position, as opposed to giving a strong affirmative argument for the position that you have, and then maybe dealing with that. And that makes it sound a little bit defensive to begin with. Although I do think there's a reason for doing that, since most people probably, see zoos as being appropriate and that sort of thing. This was a topic that I had done as a debate topic last spring, and I heard like 5 debates on this subject, so it was kind of interesting. I don't know that it worked well as a topic, but at least as a debate topic, but I think it's an interesting one for this kind of speech. All right, thank you.